if someone wants it bad enough, they know what the advice is. You keep after it until they slam the door finally and bolt it 3 ways. Because if there's a way to do it, you keep asking. And that's why I have 3 sons of my own, and I've encouraged, I would say, a little for each of them to go serve in some capacity. And if so, do it in the military, and if so, do it in aviation, because it's awesome. But then I turn around and tell them, and I tell people who reach out to the show, hey, if you don't want it real bad, you're not going to suffer through all the crap. And you probably know too from your own experience, right? Because there's the late nights, the early mornings, there's the setbacks, there's the deployments, the hardships, there's the watching your buddies die in some cases. It's a lot. And if you're not doing it for yourself, then don't bother, because you'll probably drop out the first chance you get.
Tower, Delaware Station is released to you, runway 41 left, 040 at 5, clear for takeoff.
Seat tied, altimeter 0 eyes, we're clear for takeoff, clear for the airspace. Viper check 2. My brand red curve at 354. So yeah, lights on. Next picture, 16, 15,000, Viper on target.
Jell-O, thanks for joining me on the podcast. This has been a long time coming. I know we're both busy probably doing podcasts. If people listen to the show, they probably heard the promo that you have a book that just came out recently. We just wrapped up our Seed series, but we wanted to get that out there a few weeks ago. And I'm excited to have you on here. And I will say, for those listening, you probably know the Fighter Pilot Podcast, because again, I think you probably found the Afterburn Podcast through that. You were really kind when I first started. And I think this is a testament to you as a person, but you reached out when you heard I was starting a podcast and you offered up any advice and help. And that was not universal. Okay. There are some other people out there who I think maybe saw it as a threat or competition, but you reached out and gave a lot of good point outs and have helped me along the way. So I'm grateful for that. And I'm happy to finally sit down with you and hear a little bit about Jell-O, your story from beginning to the end with your Navy career and what you're doing today. So thanks again for joining me on the podcast.
You're welcome, Rain. And as we spoke about on the little short we did on the Fighter Pilot Podcast when you first got started, I confessed then what I will reconfess now, which is when I watched your social media, I think it was Instagram at the time, announcement, there was my initial response, I'll be honest, was, crap. But then, as I sometimes do, and I've learned this finally through many years of marriage, is, okay, well, what's the opposite reaction of that? And the opposite is to embrace it and say, hey, here's another guy. He's not taking from the pie. He's just lighting more candles on top of the pie. And there's plenty of room for candles and flame and all that. And so I don't know if that analogy works, but the point being, someone who listens to me can still listen to you and vice versa. And so, yeah, I decided to take the opposite response and say, hey, man, been doing this a little while, a couple pitfalls you can avoid, let me know. And I'm ultimately glad I did. And I wish the rest of the world would do that more often in various things.
Yeah, I think coming out of the fighter pilot world, that's definitely, or just aviation in general, the steel sharpened steel. And I like your analogy, just putting more candles on top. I've been fortunate along the way too, help some buddies who start podcasts, and you could interview someone, I could interview someone, and they're going to be most likely completely different interviews. And again, if you like this type of content, probably can't get enough of it. And you can't generate enough, I can't generate enough, so collective effort there. So I do appreciate that. And again, I think that's a testament to just your personality and mentality, which, as you've alluded to, it'd be kind of nice if everyone took that approach. I think would be a lot better. So thank you again for that. But Jell-O, I like to kick it off. Where did this all begin for you? Again, you got your book out, which I think this might chronological and kind of go through because it's my normal kind of podcast flow. But how'd you get interested in flying in the first place?
Well, I was one of 4 kids, and my mom had recently divorced my dad. We were living in the San Fernando Valley in California, and my mom was looking for a wingman, I think is fair to say, to help out with 4 kids. And she was an immigrant. And so, she's like, hey, this is harder alone. And she met my stepdad. And my stepdad was the son of an Army officer who Jim is his name, has engineering inclinations, and he had been raised around military bases. We had no familiarity with it. And so he loaded us up all in the wood-paneled station wagon one day and drove us out in November of 1978, Rain, to the Naval Air Station Point Mugu Air Show. And I was 8 years old. And I was smitten. I mean, come on, there's loud noises, there's fast moving things, there's ice cream, there's, these larger than life pilots. And so I was just smitten. And I won't say from that day forward, it was like, I'm going to be a fighter pilot and nothing else matters. But then fast forward to high school, my stepdad, Jim, sat me down and said, hey, you're going to be out of high school soon. What do you think you want to do? And I said, I don't know. What does any 16-year-old say? He wants a driver's license and a girlfriend probably. But he asked the right questions and got me started, essentially, aimed my vector towards being a naval aviator. And so I owe a lot of my success to my stepdad, Jim. And so, but I will tell you this too, Rain, that air show, and I was able to corroborate this with one of my fighter pilot podcast listeners. They fired an AIM-9 Sidewinder as part of the show. I can barely remember it. Yeah, no, I barely remember it in my mind's eye. And I had a listener come on and say, oh yeah, I was there. And I remember they used to do that in the 70s. So no, that you can't imagine that today, can you?
Could you? No, I cannot. I mean, it was a huge deal if you use flares in an air show. I remember that was just, oh man, wow, you're going to start a forest fire. Could you imagine ripping off an AIM-9 in front of 100,000 people? Man.
Well, I can remember, I don't know what kind of plane dropped like a Lu-2. I don't know if you guys call that the same thing, the parachute flare.
Yep.
And then got the heck out of the way. And then an F-4 Phantom came in from east to west because we were right there on the Pacific Ocean. And I just remember this little bright light going from the F-4 to this little light hanging and the little black cloud. And I thought, what the heck just happened? And everyone erupted and in applause. It was amazing. But yeah, they don't do that anymore.
No, I have talked to some of my mentors who they're ripping around in the 60s and 70s flying fighters and go fly over the Air Force Academy or whatever, Base X. Yeah, just go supersonic, bust out a bunch of windows. Like, hey, that's completely fine. Like America.
The world has changed.
Yeah, slightly. Now we're worried about noise abatement and all sorts of things, encroachment on bases. It's just, what can you do? Yeah, right. Interesting. And I'm sure, again, a lot of people who are kind of like us have some kind of inspiration in their life early on that drives us down that path. And I think maybe puts the bumpers up there to guide you through those teenage years to get you. Because I always say the runway is short. And if you're not doing all the right things, it gets just exponentially more and more difficult to land a spot in pilot training. The later you get in life, I mean, it's the nature of the beast. It's meant for someone coming out of high school, going into the academy, going ROTC, get a degree, OTS. I mean, not saying you can't do it. So having someone at that point early in life is so critical, or you just got to be really dedicated, which, I mean, I would not have been had I not had some guide rails getting me along the way. So that kind of leads me, I didn't mention at the beginning, but almost 20 years nonstop flying in the Navy as a fighter pilot, almost 3,000 hours in the Hornet. Again, then you got to fly the greatest fighter on earth, the F-16. I meant to ask this in the beginning, how many landings on the boat do you have? I know every naval aviator has to know this number.
Oh, I do. And it's 705. And I would say successful landings because I also have about 30 plus bolters, which is where you miss all the wires, and a handful of wave offs, which in many cases, my wheels never touch the deck. So, yeah, I mean, right in the old days, and I'll caveat that and come back to it in a second, that was a mark of what distinguished me from you as a Navy and an Air Force pilot. And I'll come back to the point, which is now this precision landing mode. And I speak quite frequently about this on the Fighter Pilot podcast. Evidently, it's easy now, Rain. I mean, and not to insult you, but an Air Force guy, like you could go do probably a week of simulators and a flight or two and go straight to the boat. And in the old days, I would say, oh, well, it would take you, 6 months or a year. Yeah. And so now apparently you put the thing on the thing and you land and it's not that hard. So my identity at this point in my life is shattered.
Shatters his whole life crisis. But I mean, that's a good discussion point. I mean, that's what you want ultimately, because now let's say if that, I don't know, that took up 30% of your training time focused on landing on the boat. Now you can focus that other 30% or probably 25% on tactics. You got to be able to land on the boat. Yeah. But yeah, being able to focus on the tactics is the main thing.
And to balance that line, whenever people would ask me on my show, who's better, Navy or Air Force, I would sidestep it and say, the Navy spends a lot of time on pure airmanship because of landing on the boat. But that time we spend, the Air Force is spending on tactics. And so I think if you were to try to generalize the two, that was the case. And now to your point, they have reduced the FCLP's field carrier landing practice way down.